Welcome, everyone, to this midweek broadcast of the Brian A. podcast. Today, I speak to Arpad Szakal. Arpad and I connected over LinkedIn a while ago, prior to the pandemic. I found some of his articles quite meaningful, very well written. Long story short, we committed to getting together to bring some of his work across to our listeners of the Brian A. podcast. And well, here we are. Arpad is based in Budapest, so it'll be over a Zoom call. Just some background on him before we start. He specializes in the engineering, infrastructure, and manufacturing sectors, as well as aerospace and defense. Prior to his career in search and assessment, Arpad worked at the aviation departments of two leading international law firms in London. He handled regulatory cases, including passenger rights, and was involved in a range of complex aviation liability matters, often involving multiple jurisdictions. He supports aviation organizations globally with outplacement, redundancy, and support initiatives, and he helps aviation professionals relaunch their careers in other sectors, something obviously very applicable to the times now, which is why I'm so excited to have him on. He's also a guest lecturer at various executive education programs and speaks on a range of career management topics, including executive communication skills and career planning, as well as onboarding. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the show with him. Like I say, he's based in Budapest, so I don't have my regular team with me today. However, we'll all be together again on Friday for the Friday show. Enjoy this interview with Arpad.
Arpad, it's so nice to have you on the Brian A. podcast.
Thank you, Brian, for the opportunity and for the invite.
Yeah, it's been a while. I said in my introduction that I connected with you a while ago, and the first thing that made me want to connect with you and see what you had to say was you had a brilliant article that you wrote on pilots' transferable skills. It was very well written and very well received here in South Africa. And I've had a lot of people actually asking me, have I been in touch with you? So, well, this is my opportunity to bring you to South Africa.
Yep, thank you for the invite, and again, really glad that a lot of people found it helpful, Brian. That was really the intention.
No, thanks, Arpad. I want to get your surname right, Szakal.
It's just an S. It's there to confuse, so it's just basically Arpad Szakal. Basically, that's
Arpad Szakal. All right, and if people want to connect with you, the best way to do that. So, just before we get going with the questions, where can everyone find you?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best place to just drop me a note, and let's include it on the notes, Brian, because I think given the difficulty of the name, I think people just need to see it. We'll provide you with that. Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes. Right. Well, let's get right to it. I've got a few questions I want to ask. I think it'll cover the majority of the content I want to get through. So I'll let you answer the questions, and off you go. First thing, Arpad, just an overview of what's happening in the industry right now, from a workforce point of view, both flying personnel and office-based roles. Just your opinion on what's actually happening at the moment.
So, unlike back in May, Brian, when we did the first webinar with the Royal Aeronautical Society's career and employability team on this particular topic, on how to reinvent yourself as a seasoned aviation professional, back then no one really suspected that it's going to be such a full-blown crisis with such severe impact on the entire industry, not only airlines and airports, but also the manufacturing and the broader services side of the industry. So now it's clear, obviously, British Airways, Lufthansa, Ryanair, EasyJet, all the big players here in Europe have actually made their decision to unfortunately say goodbye to a number of their not only flying personnel, but they've made changes to their white collar sort of office-based structures as well. The US has been quiet Brian. But the only reason for that is because they had a $50 billion stimulus package that came in 2 installments, and that will run out quite quickly, quite soon. We are already seeing Hawaiian, United Airlines, American Airlines is going to lay off. I think it's around 40,000 people. There are 140,000 organizations altogether in terms of population. And you can imagine the effect that it will have really on the entire business. Asia, particularly, really badly impacted. Singapore Airlines, Cathay Pacific, obviously even the Chinese airlines have stopped recruiting. Previously as a pilot, if things turned out to be bad in the US or in Europe or Africa or wherever it was, they had a safe haven almost, which is going to Asia. Well, today that's not really an option. So Australia, Qantas, Virgin, Australia, I mean, you've seen it in the news.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that even that part of the world is just in a very dire sort of state.
Yes. Yeah. Like you say, there's almost been a second wave now. I see Europe, there's a whole lot of quarantines coming back into place. And just when we thought there might be some form of recovery, we 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's happening where I am at the moment, Brian. I'm sitting in Budapest today, and Hungary is not allowing any foreign nationals into the country as of yesterday. Yeah. That's a very drastic move, I would argue, with the need for it and what it will actually achieve. Really. So.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. If you get furloughed now, you get a call from your airline tomorrow, you get furloughed. What do you do? Practical tips, any advice you can offer?
It's really, rather than just jumping straight into job search, I think it's really just take time to grieve. I think the more people I speak to, the more I realize that basically they haven't been through that natural grieving thing. It's basically a job loss can be likened to any other loss that you experience through life. You need the time to really just reflect and realize what just happened to you and accept that it will probably not be better in the next sort of 2-3 years, and understand that you will probably need to look outside of flying, outside of the cockpit, and really just understand that in order to be able to do that, Brian, the only way to do it is to sit down with a piece of paper, write down the things that you're good at, that you're really bring from the cockpit, the skill set. I mean, from essentially what the article is talking about, really the leadership skills, the flexibility, the adaptability, the numerical skills, and really just accept that times are difficult and you will need to sell the skills that you've gained into another industry, probably, basically, most likely. So, and also volunteer, which is crazy because, of course, you're offering your services for free and you need to take care of bills and all that. But it's very important that, especially if you haven't got any degrees or if you haven't really done anything else other than flying, you need to make sure that you gain that experience. And what better way it is to really just offer it for free, and you can use it at your next interview. So.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it's giving something back is it's not going to harm you in any way at all. Yeah. We've touched on those transferable skills already. I was going to ask you a bit more about that later, but seeing that we've spoken about it, in that article, I can say as a pilot myself, it's taken a while to be able to actually identify what those transferable skills actually are. Reading your article helped me identify those skills. I know, hopefully after this interview, a lot more people will have access to your content. But just give us a run through of that article and those transferable skills that you talk about, because I think there's a lot of people out there, particularly pilots, that just view their aviation skill as one skill, which is not entirely correct.
Yeah. Starting with really the most obvious one, whether you're a first officer or a captain, it's really the effective leadership skill, which is essentially the ability to manage, lead your crew, your people who are effectively working under you. Your ability to listen to others, be open to new perspectives, adapt new ways of thinking, and these are skills, Brian, that it really, irrespective of the industry, people are looking for this. In fact, leadership is one of the skills that are, top 2, 3 that people identify as they really need. Flexibility, adaptability. I mean, waking up at odd hours of the morning, dealing with unforeseen scenarios and delays, technical problems, changes of the aircraft. These are things that a normal person in an office job doesn't have to deal with. This is something that you bring really as an added bonus to whoever you decide to join or work with, because this sort of adaptability is not required in a normal down-to-earth role, but also the emotional, the cultural intelligence that you develop. I mean, you have to start from scratch every time you sit in the cockpit, every time you work, because it's very rare that you are working with the same individual on any given flight. So it's that flexibility again, being able to work with someone who you don't even know, developing the rapport, and relate to them and get on no matter what, because 100 or 150 people in the back depend on you, basically. And that seamless working together, I think that will serve anyone well in any industry, really. Again, complex problem solving issues, the ability to really work simultaneously on various issues, come up with really unpredictable things. I think it's being a confident problem solver, Brian, is what sets a good commercial pilot apart from someone who doesn't have this. Again, the team working, the collaboration skills that you pick up in the flight deck, the pre-briefing, the post-briefing, the working with other members of the crew. It's not like you are always isolated of doors, but still there are times when you're really, but also time management would be one of those really critical skills that no matter what industry you're looking at, whether it's the energy, manufacturing, construction, infrastructure, whatever it is, they will be looking for people who are really good at really managing complex tasks when they have a deadline and when they have given parameters to perform those tasks within. So, and most importantly, or one of the most important things that I would highlight is really the communication skills that you gain. Because clear communication, as you know, in aviation, it's absolutely critical to really save lives. Basically, I mean, not having this critical skill is essentially not even an option in aviation, really. So, but again, multitasking simultaneously and effectively deal with multiple priorities, and really the confidence, the attitude, and the self-discipline. Those would be the other ones that I would highlight, because no matter what you do, what role you end up in, these will set you really apart from the competition. Basically, those would be the key ones. And the reason why these are transferable is, again, because they are not job specific, they're not industry specific. These are needed all over the world by many.
Yeah, like I said, that article that you wrote, it brought a lot of things to light for me. What I also find is, pilots have this identity. They identify with being a pilot. The second question you ask any man is, what do you do? And it's difficult to sometimes adjust your mindset, your approach. Even answering a question like that is now difficult for a lot of people. You've got to reinvent yourself. I mean, you've got to start from scratch and actually reinvent yourself, which is a challenge all on itself.
Yeah, and it's very easy to sell yourself short, because a lot of people have this mindset that all I've been doing is flying.
Yes.
What else could I possibly do?
Yes.
That's the wrong mentality, because that exposes you to people who will take advantage of you. Basically, they will just say, well, we don't fly, we don't really need these skills. The hours that you've flown is completely irrelevant. And do this for X amount of money, which might be half, but in the case of a captain, it might be even quarter or even less than what you've been on, basically. So that's why I said, Brian, when you asked me what should they do first, come to terms with it, like the way you would a death.
Well, that's something that is, I'm glad that you've said that, because we all go through these waves. I mean, I have myself, where you find up to a certain point, particularly I've had something, even this podcast has given me a lot of meaning and a lot of direction to actually give my energy to. But we all have those days where things don't go so well. And then you need to remind yourself of that. You've actually been through a relatively traumatic experience. And it's now about recovering from that so that you can move forward.
Especially when your identity is linked to it, Brian, I think, and especially in the case of a pilot, which is basically the uniform and all, it all adds to it. And once it's taken away from you, you feel that you are just not useful, basically.
You're just not useful, yeah. What parts of the industry now are still active? You're involved, obviously, through a very wide range of the industry. Pilots, obviously, it's such a narrow band that you actually operate in. I said to a colleague of mine yesterday, I actually feel more involved in the airline business right now, not flying, than what I did when I was flying, because I'm looking at it from the outside, in a much broader perspective. Anything right now that's still active, where the opportunities are, something sustainable for the future?
Within the industry, so if you're a pilot thinking, oh, do I really need to leave the industry? Does it mean that basically my aviation career is over? No, it doesn't mean that. You just need to be practical about it and really pragmatic about it as well, because in the next 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, according to IATA, the traditional employers, like the airlines, the airports, the various service providers to the industry, will not be the ones who will be hiring. They will do the exact opposite of that, shrinking the workforce and really just trying to utilize the existing people that they have. So what I think, Brian, what is going to happen and where growth is going to take place in the industry is with the smaller, like the small to medium sized sort of players, the very nimble startups and scale ups who are tackling the industry's biggest challenges and headaches. What are those? Touchless travel experience at airports. How do you board an aircraft without talking to many different people? Aircraft design. How do you build the infrastructure, both at the airport and on board the aircraft, so that you basically adapt to the new reality? Electronic flight bag, anything on the flight deck. How can we make it even more seamless, even more intuitive? I mean, that's where a pilot and the ultimate industry insider can really add value, basically, gained from those really operational, technical sort of background and experience that they've gained. And that's where they can really come in and play a very important role. So that would be one. very obvious example. I would mention one good website for anyone who's listening. It's FTE.com. I think it's futuretravelexperience.com. I think that's the where they populate quite a number of these companies who are basically innovating, who are really tackling these issues that I've just mentioned.
The whole innovation side and things coming up is obviously something that excites me on a personal level. You know, nothing stays the same for long, particularly now. Everything seems to be moving at double the speed or warp speed. So things are going to progress much faster. Something I just want to touch on briefly, and just to get your opinion, I've encouraged a lot of our listeners, particularly here in South Africa. I think we're on the southern tip of the African continent. We're quite isolated from, you know, where you are in Europe at the moment, and we're all feeling quite a lot more isolated at the moment because, you know, our South African borders are closed. We can't even travel overseas at the moment.
Yeah,
it's a strange feeling. You feel a little bit, under lockdown they call it. I've encouraged our listeners to make sure you've got an online presence. Get yourself online, particularly like a profile like on LinkedIn, just so that you have access to the stuff that's out there, people like yourself. And also, if you're not on these platforms, you're going to miss out of any of the new opportunities or new age things that you may not have even thought of.
Exactly. And this is something that I would really highlight the importance of, Brian. A lot of people overlook LinkedIn, that it's basically just another Facebook. Well, it's not. It's absolutely critical that you are on it, and having a good profile is one thing, but if you're not properly
using it,
engaged, and by engagement I mean really not only sharing content, but also really properly creating content, like writing an article, really establishing yourself as a thought leader, or really just see what you want to be known for, it will be very little value for you, because people will just not notice you. And this is what recruiters and search professionals are looking for, really, not only a good, well-crafted profile, but basically someone who is showing that they really have an expertise and they are credible, and they have a good brand. Because essentially, when you're going to an interview, you're selling yourself, you're selling your own brand. And if you don't have one electronically, well, frankly, that's a cause for concern. That means that either you don't understand the importance of that, or you just didn't take any actions, basically. And that's, you're not serious about getting spotted, basically.
Well, it boils down to what we spoke about earlier with transferable skills, or any skills that you have. You need to identify them. It's got to be something that you're interested in, something you're passionate about. And like you know, if you're passionate about something, it's very easy to write about it. It's very easy to write an article about something that you hold a passion for. Quite difficult writing an article that you're forced to. So I think it's a good way to even find out what those skills are that you have. You might surprise yourself.
I couldn't agree more. And really, I think now that we talked about the transferable skills, what are they? I think we should just spend a couple of minutes on how do you really highlight these skills when you're applying for roles, either within the industry or outside of it. I touch upon this in the article, but maybe just to remind people, or make people aware if they haven't read it. Number one, you really need to get the tangible proof. Basically, you need to demonstrate to potential employers that you have researched the industry or the role that you're applying for, and you've done your homework. It's basically, this is why I mentioned volunteering in the new industry or function, to have some work samples so that you have at least something to talk about in an interview, is critical. You don't have to be paid for experience. You can really just do it for your own and for others' benefit. But also, secondly, sharing activity, if not outright experience in the field. So just because you're not officially working in your target career field, it doesn't mean you're not doing anything relevant. So even when you have an interview, even talking about an article you've read, a seminar or a conference you've attended, or the volunteering or the free consulting that you did,
Yes.
It's all good, because it shows that basically you actually are actively pursuing something, and you're not just waiting for something to happen to you. Basically, that's the difference between someone who does that and someone who doesn't really. So,
Yeah.
and the third thing I would mention is the power of referrals, and that links obviously with networking and all that. And that would be another thing that I would suggest people to do now and use the time to build a network. Setting up informational interviews with people who are active in the target field, and really try to get them refer you and share leads with you. And because being referred, Brian, by someone who is already active in the career that you want, it really carries a lot of weight. And basically, having this social proof plays a key role when you're, especially when you're transitioning from one field into the other.
Yeah. The thing I'm taking out of there the most as well is having skills is one thing. Taking action on those skills is something totally separate, and probably more, well, definitely more, the most important thing you can do is taking action. Yeah.
Exactly. It's one thing to be aware of them, but it's basically, it's the how which will really make the difference.
Yeah. Right. We're starting from scratch. You want to build yourself a portfolio career. You want something that's got a future. How do you develop one now? You've come out of one big industry. Some people are reluctant to dive right into something else straight away. We've spoken about the grieving stuff. Take time, but how do we develop a new career? How do we develop a new portfolio?
Yeah, so I think a lot of, especially pilots, will find this a little bit strange, because you're not depending. It's a portfolio career, Brian, is essentially having multiple sources of income. So you're not depending on one airline or one airport as basically your sole source of income, but you diversify. It's a little bit like investment. So you have stakes in various different things. You can basically start with consulting, you then develop into writing, you then develop into coaching, you then develop into creating videos. So you really have, it all starts with identifying what your strengths are, what you can realistically do, and then you develop around it your expertise, basically. What are those methods that you can get from the cockpit that might be useful for a business? Basically, like, are you a problem solver? Okay, show it to us. Basically, so it's thinking very differently from the way you used to, because I think the trend, Brian, is going to be that we will not have one employers, but we will have to be more agile. All of us, not only pilots, not only cabin crew, not only people in aviation, but I think this ability to pivot and really get from one industry to the other, one role to the other, it will require that portfolio mindset. Like a consultant, you're working with multiple clients.
Yes.
Basically, you don't depend on one client, but you work with others. How do you do that? To answer your question, as crazy as it sounds, it's basically the offering the services even for free at the very beginning. And this is what we talked about, the volunteering thing. You shouldn't do this forever. because you can't and you shouldn't. But once you have some experience under your belt, like a few weeks or a few months, then you can basically develop that into maybe a paid sort of arrangement. Maybe once you delivered something for free, good, then you can develop that conversation into something, okay, I've proven myself. How about me getting paid X amount for this? So basically, this is how you get from non-paid to paid. But what volunteering got to you is the relationship with a potential client.
Yes. I fully agree with that. I genuinely do believe in giving back. I think you learn things during that course that, had you started charging for it straight away, you might have actually sold yourself short later on. Yeah. So I very much agree. And obviously, would you say, in the age of internet and like us talking over video call now, the leverage that you can get through online platforms or anything online allows you to have this portfolio. You can have a job, in one place, but you can actually be the online version of yourself can be off in another place earning you money. And I think that's obviously the ultimate goal, should be the ultimate goal for any young professional today.
Yeah, exactly. At any stage, really, I would argue that at any stage of your career, really, the flexibility and really the opportunities that the internet has given us. I mean, it's just unparalleled. I think it's fantastic. The other thing, before I forget it, it's really use this time to reskill, to upskill, to just do whatever you couldn't or didn't previously in terms of education. It doesn't have to be an expensive course. It doesn't have to be spending a lot of money on an MBA or an MSc or whatever. It can be as simple brushing up on your Excel skills, on your Microsoft package skills, on really things that you think will serve you well in a potentially an office-based role that might be the fate of many who are listening now.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's and there's an abundance of these courses available that are well worth doing, an endless amount, and a lot of them are free, like you say.
Exactly.
A last question for you, Arpad. People out there looking for positions now, you've got to manage the stress of the search. How do you manage this emotional roller coaster and the rejections that you get along the way? Any tips that you can, just from a personal level, to get you through that difficult period, or this difficult period for a lot of people?
My number one tip or advice would be to have other things going on in your life. That's probably the most important thing, because you can't job search is a job in its own on its own right, basically, and you can't possibly do this for more than 4, maybe 5 hours each day effectively, which is a lot of time, Brian, and I don't suggest anyone doing more than that, because you can actually drive yourself mad. So whatever you find relaxing, whether it's really sports, whatever you or music, or whatever takes your mind off your daily worries, you should really do that, because and surround yourself with people who can really mentor you, cheer you up, coach you, someone who has done it before. Look for people who can really seek out mentors for yourself, because that's what you need. You shouldn't be alone. You're not alone. And this is why I said those informational interviews, even if it's just online, it makes all the difference, because it gives you hope that others have succeeded in what you're about to embark upon. So that would be the most important thing that I would say. You can't do it alone.
You can't do it alone.
You can't do it alone. That's why a mentor who's maybe not, I'm not talking about friends. I'm not talking about people who know you necessarily. I'm talking about people who are really willing to be a sounding board to you, and can really just, once a week, every 2 weeks, just half an hour, keeping you on track, making you accountable, things like that. That's what I mean by that. if you have if you have a friend who can do that. But the problem with friends, Brian, is that they're biased and they're not impartial. You need someone who is not as friendly with you as someone who you know would be.
Yeah, Arpad, I'm so glad I got to have this conversation with you, because a lot of the things you're saying are the things that I very much believe in. But it's nice to get the affirmation from you that I'm thinking in the right direction. So I think it's wonderful for me to hear that, and I'm sure for our listeners as well. I wanted to ask you, are you still playing the violin?
I do. That's my way of relaxing, and that's my way of switching off and really just taking my mind off the negative things that are happening basically at the moment. But yeah, that's what I mean, Brian. Really, instruments, sports. That's a wonderful way to really just even for that half an hour to get your mind off this.
Oh, that's great advice, Arpad, and I really appreciate you taking the time and chatting to us today. I hope this isn't the last time you on the Brian Air podcast.
No, thank you again for the opportunity, Brian, and I hope that this has been of help to many, and we'll include the details about me in the show notes. So anyone who would like to have a conversation, please do get in touch. Very happy to have an initial call. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Arpad. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.